February 2017. A helicopter hovers over a luxury home in Tepic, Mexico, and starts shooting from above. In seconds, 12 bodies lay riddled with bullets, including Juan Francisco Patron Sanchez, the notorious H2. Here are the most brutal deaths of drug lords. It's January 2020. Maria Guadalupe Lopez Esquivel, known as La Catrina, slumps against a wall in Michoacan, Mexico, blood pouring from her neck. This Instagram star turned cartel boss is about to learn that social media fame can't stop a bullet. Just hours earlier, she'd been commanding her own unit of hitmen, living the lifestyle she'd always flaunted online. But now, as she gasps for breath, the soldier she was just fighting against tries to comfort her. La Catrina's path to power had started with a teenage dream. Growing up in poverty-stricken Tepalcatepec, she'd become obsessed with the glamorous portrayal of female narcos in TV shows. This made her want to become one of Mexico's most notorious female cartel leaders. Now, her opportunity finally came in 2017 when she met Miguel LM2 Fernandez, a commander in the feared Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG. And under his guidance, she transformed from a small-town girl into a ruthless sicario. La Catrina used her beauty as a weapon, building an Instagram following by posing with guns and flaunting her cartel lifestyle. But along La Catrina's rise to fame was her rise through the CJNG's ranks, and she would eventually command her personal unit of hitmen and become one of the cartel's most feared enforcement groups. Her most notorious operation came in October 2019, when she orchestrated an ambush that killed 13 police officers in Aguililla. This event was so shocking that it earned her the nickname La Catrina, after the skeletal Dame of Death figure in Mexican culture. And Maria couldn't be any more proud, so she tattooed it on her thigh as an ultimate symbol of power. But at 21 years old, La Catrina's reign was ending. Security forces had finally caught up with her in La Bocanada. In her final moments, La Catrina looked nothing like her Instagram photos. Gone was the defiant pose, the provocative smile, the careful, curated image of cartel glamour. Instead, she clung to a soldier's neck as they carried her to a helicopter, her designer clothes soaked in blood. Unfortunately for her, she died before reaching the hospital, becoming another statistic in Mexico's endless cartel wars. La Catrina's death marked a new chapter in cartel history, one where female bosses could rise as high as their male counterparts, but would fall just as hard. Her Instagram account remains active, a digital monument to the dangerous allure of cartel life, and a reminder that in this world, everyone's time runs out eventually. Mr. Santiago Mesa Lopez, known as El Pozolero, or the Soup Maker, thought he'd seen it all. As the Sinaloa cartel's body disposal expert, he had dissolved over 300 bodies in acid. But in 2009, he would learn firsthand just how effective his preferred method really was.
¿Cuánto tiempo estuviste haciendo todo esto?
Como 9, 10 años.
¿Y en ese tiempo cuántos cuerpos?
300.
Amarillo todo.
Vamos con el alambre. Vamos por el alambre.
Born into the violent world of Mexican cartels, Lopez had found his niche, making bodies disappear without a trace. But it wasn't just about killing, it was about erasing someone completely. Because to him, no bodies meant no evidence, and no evidence meant no prosecution. The technique had been around for decades, perfected through countless disappearances across Mexico's cartel territories, and the process was as methodical as it was horrific. First, victims would be tortured, some for information and some just because. Then they'd either be killed or, in the most brutal case, thrown into this acid while still alive. And as for Lopez, he had turned this gruesome task into an art form. Now, he would get these large industrial barrels and fill them with a specific mixture of acids, a formula he'd perfected over years of trial and error. This acid was strong enough to dissolve everything: skin, muscle, organs, even bones. Within hours, a human body would be reduced to nothing more than a dark, thick liquid that could be easily disposed of. Lopez's expertise came with a price. He knew too much, not just about disposal, but about countless cartel executions. He knew names, dates, and locations. He knew who ordered each killing, who carried it out, and most importantly, why. Now in the cartel world, that kind of knowledge is a death sentence waiting to happen. After his arrest and confession in 2009, where he admitted to disposing over 300 bodies, Lopez vanished. Many believe he ended up in one of the very acid vats he used to operate, becoming victim number 301 of his brutal technique. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone either. In Mexican culture, proper burial is crucial for the soul's journey to the afterlife. So, by destroying the body completely, cartels weren't just ending a life, they were essentially damning a soul. And so, the man who had made so many people vanish had vanished himself, leaving behind nothing but whispered stories of acid baths and dissolved bodies. His fate served as a chilling reminder that in the cartel world, even the executioner eventually becomes the executed.
When it comes down to it, you become a liability. Why? Because you know too much. So what they'll do to cover their asses, they'll eliminate you. If you go back into history, 99% of the victims of the Mexican Mafia have been their own members.
We take you to July 6th, 2023. Michael "The Fly" Torres walks into the yard of California State Prison, Sacramento. In less than an hour, however, his own Mexican Mafia brothers would turn against him in a brutal betrayal. That would shock even the most well-seasoned criminals. Now, as a high-ranking member of the Mexican Mafia, Torres had built his empire from behind bars. Now, this wasn't your average prison operation. We had a sophisticated criminal enterprise here. He controlled the LA County jail system like a CEO running its corporation, and managing elaborate schemes that would bring thousands of dollars each week. From his cell, he would run two main operations. First was the Kitty, a complex system of collecting and reselling Latino inmates' commissary items. But that was just the beginning. Torres demanded a 1/3 tax on all jail drug sales. Trump would be proud, creating a revenue stream that would make some legitimate businesses jealous. Torres was smart about this. He would smuggle in cell phones to stay in touch with his subordinates, demanding detailed financial reports like a corporate accountant. He would then expand the operation beyond the prison and tax gangs and drug dealers in San Fernando and Antelope Valleys. And then he would invest the profits in legitimate ventures and real estate. But power in prison's a pretty dangerous thing, and Torres was about to learn this the hard way.
The California State Prison is investigating the stabbing death of an inmate.
On July 6th, 2023, two fellow Mexican Mafia members, Ray Martinez and Juan Angel Martinez, approached Torres in the yard. To anyone watching, it might have looked like a normal prison yard conversation. The only difference here is that these men weren't there to talk business. Without warning, they pull out their shivs, and the attack was over before anyone realized it started, with Torres, the man who had run his empire with an iron fist, not being able to defend himself against his own brothers. The same organization that had given him power had now decided he was a liability.
Torres had been serving a 133-year sentence for a list of crimes, including attempted murder, and was a third-strike offender.
His death sent a clear message throughout the prison system. In the criminal underworld, today's brother could be tomorrow's executioner, and that no amount of power or influence can protect you when your own family decides you've become a liability.
He was hit 3 times. He was wounded. He continued fire.
Let's go back to December 2nd, 1993. The sun is beating down on a modest house in Medellin, Colombia. Inside here is Pablo Escobar, making a phone call to his family. It would be his last act as the world's most powerful drug lord. Within minutes of that phone call, his empire will end in a hail of bullets. Just months earlier, though, Escobar had been untouchable. His wealth was beyond imagination. He owned mansions all across Colombia, and at some point, he even built his own luxury prison.
Forbes magazine came out with their richest men in the world, and he was right near the top of the list. So, right off the bat, you knew that this man was not a millionaire, he was a billionaire.
But times had changed. The DEA had stripped away his protection piece by piece. His own men were dying daily, hunted down by a vigilante group known as Los Pepes, short for people persecuted by Pablo Escobar. These guys weren't just any vigilantes. They were the families of everyone Escobar had killed, and their thirst for revenge was endless.
They pretty much stripped him of much of his organization.
Well, it was to our advantage. You got to give Los Pepes a lot of credit for Pablo Escobar's demise.
With his empire crumbling, Escobar started making mistakes that would normally be reserved for rookies. He started taking unexplainable risks, making unnecessary calls, and letting his desperation show. And the DEA? They could smell blood in the water.
He was taking more risks. He was making more phone calls. He was also becoming more threatening in his tones. His acts of desperation made us feel that we were getting closer and closer and closer.
December 1993, radio intercepts led police to his hideout, and as they smashed through the doors, Escobar and his last loyal bodyguard, Limon, scrambled onto the rooftop. But this time there's no escaping. The gunfight that followed was brief but intense. Escobar returned fire, fighting until his last breath. 3 shots found their mark. And so the most powerful drug lord who ever lived died that day.
The very first message transferred over the radio was, "Viva Colombia! Matamos a Pablo Escobar! Long live Colombia! We've just killed Pablo Escobar!"
The king was dead, but his legacy of violence lives on to this day. His final rooftop stand became a symbol of how even the most mightiest of empires can crumble when the whole world turns against you.
I'm surprised it took that long, to be honest with you.
And why do you say that?
You ratted out a lot of people. I'm surprised it wasn't early, that's all.
We take you to October 2018, and we have James Whitey Bulgar, Boston's most notorious gangster, arriving at Hazleton Federal Prison in West Virginia. Now they call this place Misery Mountain, and Bulgar is about to find out exactly why. At 89 years old, Bulgar was just a shadow of the feared crime boss who once terrorized South Boston. He played a dangerous game, feeding information to the feds about his enemies while building his own criminal empire.
He was the scariest criminal I ever came across. You could see it in his eyes. He just had that stare in his eyes, 1,000-yard look. He was just ruthless. He was just ruthless.
Now his reign ended with 16 years on the run, followed by a capture and conviction of 11 murders. But that wasn't enough for the criminal underworld. Bulgar had broken their cardinal rule: never talk to the FBI. His transfer to Hazleton might as well have been a death sentence. That's because in the prison hierarchy, informants rank lower than anyone else. And Bulgar wasn't just an ordinary CI. He was perhaps the most infamous snitch in American criminal history. That being said, Bulgar didn't even make it to his first breakfast at Hazleton.
The criminal turned FBI informant who was captured after 16 years on the run was found dead this morning in a federal prison in West Virginia.
Within hours of his arrival, inmates found their way into his cell and their message was written in blood. A horrifically brutal beating with a padlock-filled sock, followed by an attempt to gouge out his eyeballs and cut out his tongue. The symbolism was crystal clear. That's what happens to guys who see too much and talk too freely. The man who built an empire by playing both sides discovered that, eventually, everyone has to pick a team, and he chose the wrong one. We jump to May 31st, 2022, in a prison medical center in Butner, North Carolina. Gilberto Rodriguez Orea takes his final breath. The man who once controlled 80% of the world's cocaine trade dies alone, thousands of miles away from that empire he built. But this wasn't the quick, violent death most drug lords face. It would be a slow and humiliating descent into obscurity. They called him the chess player, and for a good reason. While Pablo Escobar was waging war against the Colombian government, Gilberto built his empire through boardroom tactics and corporate strategy. You see, the Cali cartel was, for all intents and purposes, a criminal corporation.
They were planning to eventually become the Kennedys of Colombia.
Under Orea's leadership, they owned everything from pharmacies to radio stations. Their influence stretched across continents, generating $8 billion annually, and that's more than some small countries' entire economies. But even the craftiest chess player eventually runs out of moves. In 1995, Colombian police found Gilberto hiding in a secret compartment behind a bookcase in his luxury apartment. It was a rather undignified end for a man who saw himself as a legitimate businessman. Yet somehow, this wasn't the end. Gilberto managed to get released after serving just 7 years, thanks to his lawyers. But his freedom would be short-lived. The US government wanted their shot at this chess player, and then in 2004, he was extradited to America and faced 30 years in a federal prison. And not long after that, Gilberto's health began to deteriorate, with the cancer eating away at his body.
Dile en atendernos. ¿Cómo siguió? ¿Cómo va su corazón?
Pues físicamente un poquito maltratado.
Sí.
Pero espiritualmente bien, ¿sabe?
His lawyers had begged for compassionate release, painting a picture of a frail old man who posed no threat to society. The U.S. justice system saw through that act. They remembered the billions of dollars in drugs, the countless lives destroyed, and the communities that were ravaged by addiction. In his final years, Gilberto was just another dying inmate in a prison medical ward. No luxury apartments, no corporate empire, not even a window view. It was checkmate for the chess player.
One of the most feared narcotics, homicidal maniacs that we've ever encountered.
September 3rd, 2012. We're outside a butcher shop in Medellin, Colombia, and a 69-year-old woman was just shopping, unaware that this motorcycle was pulling up behind her. In seconds, 2 bullets to the head end the reign of cocaine's most ruthless queen, killed by the very method of assassination she often used. Griselda Blanco wasn't your typical drug lord. As her male counterparts would build empires through strategic violence, she terrorized Miami through sheer brutality. They called her the Black Widow, and like her namesake, she had a habit of killing those closest to her, including her own husbands.
She broke the glass ceiling in terms of female drug traffickers.
Her rise to power started early, shockingly early. At just 11 years old, Griselda committed her first murder, kidnapping and killing a child from a wealthy neighborhood. It was a chilling preview of the brutality to come, but it would be in Miami where Griselda truly made her mark. As cocaine flooded the city streets in the late 70s, she built an empire that raked in $80 million per month. That's $2 million every single day, people, and she protected that empire with unprecedented violence.
She decided to stop being the victim and become the victimizer, and that worked out well for her. It didn't work out for very many people that met her, though.
What sets her apart wasn't just her gender. It was her complete disregard for the unwritten rules of the drug trade. Because while male kingpins generally avoided targeting women and children, Griselda showed no such restraint. She made a habit out of actually ordering hits on rival families. Her first husband, Carlos Trujillo, had taught her the art of passport forgery and had helped her build her early smuggling operation. But when a business deal went wrong, well, Griselda knew what she had to do.
She actually had him killed. Just pay somebody to kill him.
Now her second husband, Alberto Bravo, met an even more personal end, as she shot him in the face, after accusing him of stealing from her, of course. It would be these murders earning her the nickname the Black Widow, and she seemed to relish the fear it inspired.
This was another level of killing that cannot be explained by anything, I think, in her background. I think it's something in her.
Her paranoia, fueled by heavy cocaine use, led to even more senseless killings. But that reign of terror, as brutal as it was, reached new heights with the Dadeland Mall massacre in July 1979.
The shootout occurred at about 2:30 this afternoon when 2 or more Latin males entered the Crown Liquor Store here on the west end of the Dadeland Mall.
Her hitmen stormed into a liquor store in broad daylight and unleashed a hail of bullets.
2 men slaughtered in a shower of bullets.
They were well armed, we can say that, and they came prepared to do battle.
This attack marked the beginning of Miami's infamous cocaine wars. The violence became so extreme that President Reagan had to declare war on drugs in South Florida, flooding the area with federal agents. But even this massive law enforcement response couldn't stop Griselda's reign of terror. Her operation wasn't just violent, it was sophisticated. She pioneered new smuggling routes and distribution methods. building a network that even reached every major U.S. city. The law finally caught up with the Black Widow in 1985, but even then she managed to avoid true justice. A scandal involving her hitman and 2 secretaries from the state's attorney's office forced prosecutors to offer her a plea deal. Instead of death row, she just got 20 years. Released in 2004 and deported back to Colombia, Griselda seemed to have escaped punishment for her countless crimes. But karma had other plans. Because that September day in 2012, as she was shopping for meat in Medellin, her past finally caught up with her. The motorcycle assassination, 2 shots to the head, the Black Widow's blood staining the same streets where she had once ordered so many deaths decades before. We jump to February 9th, 2017, and those Mexican military choppers are descending on this luxury home in Tepic, unleashing a storm of machine gun fire that turns the building into rubble. In minutes, drug lord Juan Francisco Patron Sanchez, known as H2, and 11 of his men are obliterated. But this wouldn't be your typical cartel takedown. In fact, it was the first time Mexico had ever authorized a chopper raid in a densely populated area. The government wanted to send a crystal clear message here that no drug lord was safe, not even in their own home. Now, many of you might be wondering who was H2, and that's exactly how he liked it. While other kingpins couldn't resist showing off their social media profiles or making headlines, H2 was the kind of guy who preferred to stay away from the limelight. This guy quietly ran a faction of the BLO cartel controlling drug operations along Mexico's Pacific coast from his base in Nayarit. H2's crew had their fingers in everything: human smuggling, kidnapping, extortion, and whatever in between. But unlike other cartels who ruled through pure terror, H2 would take a page from the old Beltran Leyva playbook, in that he preferred buying people off rather than shooting them. His network of corrupt officials ran deep, which in turn rendered him practically untouchable in Nayarit and southern Jalisco. And the story of how he got there is equally as interesting. Now, H2 rose through the ranks of the BLO, a cartel that started out as part of El Chapo's Sinaloa empire before everything went south. The Beltran Leyva brothers accused El Chapo of ratting out their brother Alfredo to the authorities, and their payback was brutal. They had El Chapo's 22-year-old son gunned down in a shopping center parking lot. It was that betrayal, sparking one of Mexico's bloodiest cartel wars to date. The Beltran Leyvas teamed up with the Juarez cartel and turned Ciudad Juarez into a war zone. And some members even jumped ship to join Los Zetas in hopes of finding shelter. And that's when H2 really made his move. As the BLO brothers dropped like dominoes, he carved out his own piece of the empire. He runs the operation like a ghost, bribing officials and managing drug routes, while somehow staying off the government's radar for years. But despite his low profile, H2 wasn't exactly living like a monk. His mansion in Tepic was lavish, and everyone knew who he was. But he was smart enough to let other criminals grab the headlines while he built his network quietly. Even as authorities were busy arresting the Beltran Leyva brothers one by one, H2 kept expanding his territory. But by 2017, the pressure was mounting. You see, the United States was breathing down Mexico's neck about the cartels, and President Enrique Peña Nieto needed to prove that he wasn't just sitting on his hands. H2's name was on a hit list of 122 priority targets, and his luck was about to run out. When the raid kicked off, ground forces first surrounded his compound. H2's crew fought back with some heavy weapons, and that would be their first big mistake, because the military then brought in their own big guns. Choppers swooped in, and by sunrise, when the dust settled, you saw a bullet-riddled mansion and a bunch of shot-up vehicles. The Mexican government couldn't have been happier with how that raid went down. No civilians were caught in the crossfire, despite the attack being carried out right in the middle of the city. H2 became target number 107, crossed off their list, and another nail in the BLO coffin. As successful as it was, it took 2 military choppers and an entire army on the ground to take out 12 cartel members. And meanwhile, groups like the Sinaloa cartel and the CJ&G were getting stronger by the day, packing the kind of firepower you'd usually see in a war zone. In the end, though, Juan Sanchez's story is a cautionary tale for any cartel leader. It doesn't matter if you're flashy or low profile. the violence catches up with everyone eventually. And lastly, we arrive at April 13, 2015, with Mexican authorities making a gruesome discovery just across the border. Inside a beer cooler lay the dismembered remains of Jocelyn Alejandra Niño, otherwise known as Laaflaka, one of the Gulf Cartel's youngest female assassins. Her body, along with 2 others, showed signs of torture. In fact, the brutality was so extreme that the only thing identifying Laaflaka was the word Niño, tattooed on what remained of her forearm. Now, Laaflaka's story doesn't start like your typical cartel tale. Born in the 1990s in Tamaulipas, Mexico, she would grow up in poverty, far from the lavish lifestyles of famous drug lords. And by the time most teenage girls her age were finishing high school, Jocelyn was already climbing the ranks of one of Mexico's most dangerous criminal organizations. But what made her truly stand out would be her ambition. When most female recruits were assigned roles as lookouts or honey traps, Jocelyn wanted more. She proved herself capable with weaponry, tactical planning, and even leadership. And before long, she was commanding her own unit with Los Ciclones, a powerful faction of the Gulf Cartel operating near the Texas border. But in the age of social media, even cartel assassins can't be immune to viral fame. A photo of Laaflaka made its way online, showing a very pretty young woman with a disarming smile holding a modified assault rifle. The image spread like wildfire across all platforms, and people couldn't believe someone so young and innocent-looking could be a high-ranking cartel member. But it was that exposure that later proved to be her downfall. A rival faction known as Los Metros saw an opportunity and leaked that photo to crime-tracking websites. And once her face was public knowledge, Laaflaka became vulnerable. Her enemies could now track her movements, identifying her associates, and most importantly, they were planning their attack. Yet despite knowing the dangers, Jocelyn didn't go into hiding. She continued operating in plain sight, managing her territory with the same confidence that had gotten her to the top. Los Metros had already set their plan in motion. Between April 12th and 13th, they captured Laaflaka and 2 of her associates. The exact details of what happened to them in those final hours do remain a mystery, but the state in which they were found paints a horrific picture. We have 3 mutilated bodies discovered in the back of a truck stuffed into beer coolers. According to investigators, they say she was likely executed before being dismembered. And next to the bodies, her killers left a chilling message, threatening all members of Los Ciclones, specifically criticizing them for using female soldiers. They would go as far as even posting photos of her body on social media as a final statement to anyone who might dare to cross them in the future. Now, some say Laaflaka had been killed by another female assassin, known as La Gladys, from the Zetas cartel. But the truth really died with her that day. What's clear is that she was targeted not just for her role in Los Ciclones, but because she dared to rise above what many believe shouldn't be possible for a young woman in the cartel world.